What you got in there? In here? Doom.
So I've decided to make a slightly different type of video on the channel today. With the hype for Doom the Dark Ages building up as we approach 2025, I just really want to talk about my favourite video game franchise, which is Doom. So in this video I'm going to be ranking each entry in the mainline Doom series whilst talking a bit about each game and my relationship with it. And I will preface this by saying there isn't a single Doom game I do not like. I enjoyed playing every single one and all the DLC as well. So on that note, Doom 2 is the worst. This is pretty much the only Doom game in the entire franchise which basically just feels like more of the game that came before but worse. Obviously Doom 2 does a lot right, like the addition of the super shotgun, which is probably my favourite gun in the entire series, plus it gave us some really iconic demons and a very eerie final level, but the overall level design in Doom 2 alone, it just holds the game back. I am aware that most of these levels were designed by just one guy, Sandy Peterson, and you know, shout out to him, of course he's a legend in his own right, but I just found some of these like big open areas pointless, and many times the flow of the game, it would come to a halt because actual progression through the level required like a mandatory activation of a secret hidden door that the game wouldn't hint at or something to that effect, you know, it just felt very cheap. Next is going to be Doom the OG. I actually kind of love this game, you know, it plays so well even to this day, and it's just so good to shoot demons on this game, and the music is timeless. I mean, I actually tried to play this game many years ago on the Super Nintendo and I couldn't get past the first level because of how bad the frame rate was, but I got there eventually, and I'll say this, all these levels have a really nice flow to them and you do feel a good sense of progression as you work your way through this one. Like every other game really built on this game's foundation and improved on it in a unique way, which is why Doom is so low, but it's still a great game that I rate highly. I actually think killing demons on this game is way more satisfying than the vast majority of FPS titles on the market today. But the next game which I'm going to place right next to Doom OG is Doom 64, which I for many years just assumed was a port of the original Doom on the Nintendo 64. So yeah, 64 was the last Doom game I actually played in the mainline series, and it's kind of the last true classical Doom game, you know, structurally. Like it plays very similar to the first two, but with a lot of changes in its overall tone which make it feel like a fresh new experience, and I really like the redesigns given to a lot of these demons and just this game's whole vibe overall. It feels very Quake, more gothic and eerie with like the music, and there's like crying babies and stuff I think in this one. So yeah, I really like 64, plus the fully upgraded Unmaker is such a lovely gun.
The devil is real. I know. Built his cage.
I'm getting abnormal readings here.
Now we get into the nitty gritty. Doom 3 is a controversial Doom game for many. Like, it's really dark, like hard to see what's going on kind of dark, you know, hence the flashlight. But it's basically a horror game. There's no super shotgun in the base game, and it's not much of a power trip compared to like previous Doom games, and I honestly love it for all those reasons, you know. Doom 3 feels different. For starters, this game, it holds up so well, and that whole like 2000s era of PC shooters that were heavily inspired by Doom 3, I just love them. They all scratch a very similar itch for me, and I love the risk they took with this game. And it does kind of slowly, in my opinion, towards the end become more of like the standard Doom experience. But for many that was too little too late, but not me though. I love Doom 3. I don't love that you don't kill the main boss in the base game, or that the game ultimately became the odd one out in like the grand Doom timeline. It's just kind of there whilst everything else interconnects quite nicely, so that's kind of, you know, whatever. These next two games weren't easy for me to like truly rank which one I liked more overall, and I do love the Evil Dead analogy of Doom 2016 being Evil Dead 1 and Eternal being Evil Dead 2, because although they are quite different, they are both still sibling games, and I do love them both in that way. Also, the Dark Ages is very clearly Army of Darkness in this trilogy analogy, which is quite funny. So I settled on Eternal being the inferior one, mainly because as much as I do love the gameplay in Eternal, and the game doesn't in my opinion force you to play a certain way, but it does heavily encourage it. Like, oh, there's a Kaka demon over there, I'm gonna switch to my shotgun and grenade launch it for an instant glory kill, or there's one of those big like fire demon guys, I'm gonna precision shot both of its arms off so that it does like a lot less damage, or you know, just stuff like that. Every demon has like a little shortcut which requires you to constantly switch between your weapons for the most optimal kill, which, you know, is cool once you've like mastered it. You feel like a badass when you're playing Eternal, but it's like the level of freedom in 2016 when it comes to like how you want to approach a fight or a demon encounter, that just trumps everything for me. Also, I dig the vibe of 2016 a lot more. It's very less arcade Doom. Not that I dislike that, I just prefer the more grounded vibe that they went with in 2016. Also, Eternal did have a heavier emphasis on like story and lore, which I absolutely loved. Like that whole aspect of the game I thought was great. And those platforming sections are amazing. Like, I'll fight anybody. They break up the game and help pace it better by creating these little breathers in between intense arenas, which you end up anticipating more because of the platforming sections, you know? I know some people hate the climbing in Eternal, but I'm all for it. And I do want to quickly just touch on how epic the Ancient Gods DLC expansion was. Like, it's still kind of the end of this Slayer's story as of right now, which is, you know, kind of sad, but it was such an epic and important chapter, and they kind of relegated it to DLC, which many people didn't play because they kind of made part 1 hard, like on accident. Like, it was really hard for a lot of people at launch. I think they fixed it now, but still a lot of people just never got past it. I used to wish that they just like perfected and really sat on this expansion so they could have made this like the 3rd Doom game in this trilogy, but I am ultimately glad that they didn't do that. Doing Doom the Dark Ages, it feels like each entry is very unique and distinct from one another, and they all have their own look, and they have like a different core gameplay philosophy, which I think is really important to this franchise. So I am ultimately glad that they didn't go that route with the Ancient Gods. So obviously that only leaves Doom 2016, and this game is very special to me. You know, I vividly remember one night just leaving YouTube on as I went to bed, and I was woken up by like the loud music, and when I turned to like face my TV, it was like this developer documentary talking about the making of Doom 2016. And before I went back to bed, I just kind of watched a bit, and I kind of thought to myself, you know, that looks quite good, you know? And I ended up consuming like little bits of 2016 centric content all throughout that night, which I feel like it subconsciously put the game on my mental to playlist. And around this time, I wasn't really gaming a lot at all. I had like a lot of college work at the time, and I was becoming very consumed by that. So during this family holiday, I ended up spending about a week in this room because my phone had just broken before we flew out. And I wasn't able to get that fixed in time. All I had was my DS and some games to keep me entertained, and I was just so bored out of my mind. I missed my Xbox so much. I just wanted to play like some proper video games again, you know. And I was just constantly waiting for the holiday to end. So the second I could get back home, I was just like, I was gonna buy Doom and a bunch of other games. I was going to get back into it and get my game drive back, because that had been minimal, and I had fallen out of love with gaming, which, you know, every gamer can relate to, I'm sure, to an extent. And Doom was really the game that brought me back in. As the holiday ended, I went straight to CEX. You know, I bought a copy of Doom and a bunch of other games, and I played Doom first. That first playthrough was a blur. Like, I've never experienced a game that made me feel that powerful and that epic. And, you know, I'm not someone who loves repetition. I very rarely see the same film twice in a row, like at the cinema and stuff like that. But upon completing Doom 2016, like without hesitation, I booted up the game again straight away on a harder difficulty, and it was just so good. I haven't spoken much about the music in this franchise, but every single Doom game's soundtrack is amongst one of the greatest of all time, and you know, that's an important distinction to emphasize, because the gap between 2016 and the rest is huge. Like, it's not even close. This game's soundtrack is perfect. Like, the whole game is perfect, to be honest. This would absolutely be my favorite video game of all time if it wasn't for one other title, but that's a story for another day. This was meant to be just like a simple like Doom ranking, but I feel like I got a bit carried away there. But regardless, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.